You've watched them, not in a creepy way, not obsessively, just you've noticed, more than once, more than you intended to. The way they talk about God like the conversation is easy. The way answers seem to arrive for them before they've finished asking. The marriage that works. The peace that shows on their face. The prayer life they describe that sounds like something you read about, but have never quite lived. And you're genuinely happy for there. That's the part you need to know before anything else. You actually love this person. You want good things for there. When they share what God is doing, you celebrate with there. But underneath the celebration, in a place you don't show anyone, something else is happening. A comparison you didn't choose. A question you didn't invite. Why does it look so easy for them? And why does it feel so hard for you? You never said that out loud, because saying it out loud would require admitting you were even thinking it. And thinking it already feels like a betrayal of someone you love, and a betrayal of the faith you're supposed to have. So you keep it quiet. You celebrate out loud, and carry the question in silence. And the question gets heavier the longer nobody names it. So consider this the naming. Here's what makes it so hard to process. You're not comparing yourself to someone who has everything easy. You're comparing yourself to someone who loves the same God you love, who prays the same prayers, who reads the same Bible, and gets what looks like a completely different result. And that specificity is what makes this particular comparison so disorienting. If they had things you didn't because of circumstance, background, resources, luck, you could file it somewhere. But this isn't circumstance. This is the same faith producing what looks like a different yield. And the question that produces isn't, why does they have more than me? It's, why does the same God seem to show up differently for there than he does for me? And underneath that question is one you haven't finished thinking. What does they know that I don't? What do they have access to that I don't? Is there a version of this that works better than the version I'm living? And the most unsettling part, the part you've never admitted to anyone, is that sometimes you don't want them to lose what they have. You just want to understand why you don't have it too. Not jealousy in the simple sense. Something more confused and more honest than that. The specific ache of standing next to someone whose faith produces fruit you can see, while yours produces something you have to take entirely on faith that it's producing at all. And that ache has a name, but it's not the name you've been giving it. Here's something worth sitting with. You're not seeing their faith. You're seeing their output. And outputs are not the same as faith, because what you're watching, the answered prayers, the visible peace, the marriage that works, the joy that shows on their face, those are the products of their life with God. They're not their life with God, and their life with God, the actual interior experience of following him, you have no access to. You don't see the 3 a.m. moments. You don't see the prayers that went unanswered. You don't see the decade of difficulty that preceded the visible peace. You don't see what it costs to get to the place where the answers come easily, or whether the answers actually come as easily as they look. Because here's what social reality does, even in church, even in the most authentic communities. People share what has resolved. They share the testimony after the breakthrough. They share the peace after the processing. They share the answered prayer after the long season of waiting. And the output looks effortless from the outside. And you are comparing your interior, all of it, including the hard parts, including the doubt and the struggle and the unanswered prayers, to their exterior. And that comparison was always going to be unfair to you. But here's what's actually happening underneath the comparison. The ache you feel isn't envy in the way you've been afraid it is. It's longing. And longing and envy are not the same thing. Envy wants to take what someone else has. Longing wants what they have to also be possible for you. And what you're feeling, the pull you experience when you watch their faith produce what it produces, is not, I wish they didn't have that. It's, I want to know if that's available to me. That's not a corrupt emotion. That's one of the most honest prayers you could bring to God. Because underneath the comparison is a desire, a real one, for the kind of faith that produces what you're watching, for the answered prayers, for the peace that shows on someone's face, for the marriage that works, for the sense that God is close and responsive and moving. And that desire, however confusing the form arrived in, is not something to be ashamed of. It's a prayer that hasn't found its words yet. And God receives prayers that haven't found their words. He always has. Think about two musicians playing the same instrument. One of them makes it look effortless. The bow moves, the sound comes, the music flows in a way that seems natural and unconstructed. The other one is working. You can see the effort, the concentration, the gap between what they're producing and what they're reaching for. And if you only watch the performance, you might conclude that one of them has a gift the other doesn't. But if you could see the practice rooms, you'd see something different. You'd see that the effortless-looking musician practiced for a decade before anything looked effortless. You'd see the years of producing the wrong sound, the months of technique that felt mechanical before it became natural, the long, private, unseeable process of becoming someone who plays like that. And you'd see that the one who looks like they're working might be exactly where the other one was 10 years ago, not behind, earlier in a process that leads to the same place. Their faith looks easier than yours, and you can't see their practice room. You can't see what the faith that looks easy looked like when it was still hard. You're comparing your practice room to their performance, and that comparison was always going to make you feel behind. You're not behind. You're in a different place in the same process. Rachel watched Leah have children for years, and the text doesn't soften it. Rachel said to Jacob, "Give me children or I will die." That's not a polite prayer. That's desperation shaped by comparison. She was watching someone she knew, someone in the same household, under the same conditions, receive the thing she couldn't. And the ache of that wasn't rebuked. It wasn't corrected into a better theological posture. It was received, and God listened to Rachel. That phrase, God listened to Rachel, appears in Genesis 30 after years of their watching and aching and comparing. Not after they stopped feeling it. Not after they produced the correct spiritual response to their longing. After years of a very human, very painful, very specific ache. God listened. And then the text says something small that carries enormous weight. God remembered Rachel. Not after they got their theology right. After years of the ache, God remembered. And the desire that felt like a liability, the longing that looked too much like envy to bring to God cleanly, was the very thing he was already holding. He had been holding it the whole time they thought they was carrying alone. And he is holding yours. Right now, in the form it actually is. Not the cleaned up version, the real one. So here's what I want to say about the comparison you've been carrying. The ache is not a character flaw. It's not evidence of weak faith. It's not a sin you need to repent of before you can bring it to God. It's a desire, wrapped in a comparison, that arrived in a confusing form. But underneath the comparison, underneath the why does it look easier for there, is something God recognizes. A person who wants what faith can produce, who is watching someone else's life and not feeling grateful for the evidence, but hungry for it, hungry to know that the same thing is possible in their own story. And hunger is not the opposite of faith. It's often where faith begins, not in certainty, in wanting, the comparison you've been ashamed of, maybe the most honest thing you brought to God in a long time. Not because comparison is the goal, because what the comparison revealed, the longing underneath it, the specific desire, the ache for a faith that produces what you're watching. That is real. That is yours. And God doesn't receive the cleaned up version of that. He receives it the way it actually is. In the confusion, in the comparison, in the place where you haven't been able to sort out yet what's envy and what's longing. He receives it there, and he holds it, and he has been holding it the whole time you thought you were ashamed of it. Before you go, type these words in the comments. My longing is a prayer, not as a declaration that the comparison is resolved, as a permission to bring it to God in the form it actually arrived. Unclean, unresolved, honest, because that's the version he's been waiting for. Not the corrected one, the real one.